All right, Jim, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from John Sean Williams, the pride of Buffalo, Texas. Do you believe that Terry Gordy would have made a good NWA champion in his prime? He certainly had the skills, and Robert Hayes and Garvin would have been a pre-Horseman clique. Thank you for your thoughts.
Well, Roberts, Hayes, and Garvin would have been together because if Roberts was around, Garvin would have been involved because there wouldn't have been a need. Boy, Terry Gordy was one of the most awesome in-ring workers, and Terry was, before his incident on the plane, was an incredible promo that sounded like nobody else because he sounded exactly like him, Terry Gordy, big old Bam Bam. He could work with anybody, have any kind of match, was probably the most giving of the Freebirds because he was the most impressive and the one with the least amount to prove. I don't know that he would have made a good NWA champion because in one era, the champion should go in and the challenger should look better in every way. That's the old, the Dory Funk Jr., the Pat O'Connor, even the Thez at some points, the Jack Briscoe kind of champion, where the challenger usually was the one with the color and the personality and the gimmick. And even if they couldn't work up to the standard of the champion was good enough where he could make them look better. That was the champion's job at that point. Gordy would not have been good at that because he was such a personality. He couldn't be a low-key guy. He couldn't be a cool, calm champion. He had to be Terry fucking Gordy. So in later years, when it became more like the Flair model, where he'd go in and he had the color and the charisma, but you still wanted to see him get his ass kicked, Terry could get all kinds of heat as a heel, but I just wonder if, you know what I'm saying? I don't see Terry as the guy to come in and let the other guy shine just as much. I mean, not to say that he wouldn't, just that Terry Gordy was a wild motherfucker in his prime, athletic prime, before the knee injuries, especially before the OD on the plane. He got a lot of attention just by doing his shit. I think he needed to be in the position where all the oomph was on him. What do you think?
Watts made Gordy the Universal Champion in 86. So you had Flair as the NWA champion, and, Dusty for a short time in 86, but Flair, you had Hogan in the WWF, and Terry Gordy in the UWF, which was, as different as Hogan and Flair were, Gordy was really different from both of them.
Yeah.
And I love Terry Gordy, and I'm a big fan of his. And in 86, despite having awful knees, go look how much tape he has on his knees, he was tremendous in Japan and in America, especially in the UWF. Him and Dr. Death Steve Williams, probably the first great Steve Williams matches in the United States on TV were him and Terry Gordy.
And you mentioned with Gordy's knees also, he had 2 torn ACLs that he did not have fixed, and for a long time, he didn't even wear braces at 280 pounds. He dropped about 20 or 30 pounds. That's when he lost a little weight, when he tore the ACLs. He just taped them for a while. Then he started wearing a brace later, but he never had them fixed and could still work like that.
But you know what? To me, as much as I like him, and he's one of my favorites from that era, I kind of don't see him as a world champion. I almost think that was kind of a mistake for the UWF when you're trying to go national and do these things. It was a risk, it was a gamble, but I don't know if I would have done that. What do you think?
Well, that's the thing, Duggan. Duggan was always the babyface 1B.
And that's who, by the way, I believe Gordy beat Duggan in the finals in Houston in the tournament.
I think he did. And see, that's the thing, is that the champion in Mid-South was Magnum TA, or it was a more traditional kind of babyface if it was a babyface at all. And Duggan was babyface 1B until he was really the last name left when they were trying to expand, and he was over so strong they ended up putting him really in the title picture. he had the kick-ass babyface spot. He was an equal draw on the card, but you didn't put the belt on him. That was reserved for the more traditional kind of champion. I think Gordy's same thing. He could be just as much at the box office, and he can have just as good matches. But if he was a babyface, you wanted him in the kick-ass babyface mode. And if he was a heel, you wanted him to be the antagonist to your hero rather than the guy himself.
Again, they had Ted DiBiase there too, who was a fresh babyface again in '86 after being a heel for a few years. So there's another option. But again,
he's the technician. That's guy is more of a champion. But Terry Gordy, a guy like that, or Duggan, would win the street fight if he didn't win the wrestling match.
And here was the other problem with the UWF in '86. Terry Gordy, Universal Champion, All Japan commitments. Ted DiBiase, top babyface, All Japan commitments. Hacksaw Duggan, New Japan commitments. Steve Williams. I mean, there's so many top guys that you would lose and have to do something for a little period of time, but
because that's the problem. Watts wanted the kick-ass guys, the tough guys, but so did Japan. And because Watts was the third horse, he couldn't pay. None of the Crockett guys went to Japan because they didn't have to. We'd have taken a cut in pay to get started over there. But in Louisiana, the top Japanese guys, or top guys in Japan, were making more money over there than they'd make working for Watts.
Let me ask you one more thing about this before we wrap up this question. Obviously, the NWA never had touring tag team champions. Every territory had their own tag team champions, even though some of them were called the World Tag Team Champions. There was no universally recognized NWA World Tag Team Champions during the territory days, for the most part.
Right. There were territories that had long-standing World Tag Team Champions recognized, but they didn't tour all of the NWA territories.
If the NWA did have touring tag team champions, would the Freebirds have worked, or would they have not worked as touring tag team champions?
Again, I mean, you can, with talent and the right promotion, you can make anything work. But
again, to be a touring champion, you're coming in and out. I mean, it's like Flair. You're going in, you're leaving.
Yeah. You would have had recognition off their run off Atlanta TV, TBS. People knew the Freebirds' name. And they would, if they were positioned as heels, then that would work also because the local babyface team could be the challengers. You know, then, I mean, obviously the problem that comes up was, especially in their heyday, you would have a problem with getting all three of the Freebirds to towns not in their own territory. And would they have the personal discipline, let's say? But that could have worked. A team, the Midnight Express, could have worked. Once that we were on TBS and started getting in the magazines, where people had an idea of who we were, and the fact that either set of the Midnight could have worked with anybody in any territory, no matter who the local team was. It would have been harder, as it was with the heavyweight champion, to have a stone cold, not Steve Austin, but just an absolute babyface team as the traveling champions, like it was when you had an absolute babyface champion. Even Jack Briscoe had to get a little heelish every once in a while when he was facing the top babyface in the territory. So it would have been easier for a heel team. But, if they'd have put the promotion behind it and all the offices had got behind it and wanted to bring that team to their territory, after a year or two, it would have started to pick up some steam. But then you'd have to find a team that you wanted to leave those belts on for a long period of time, 3-4 years, like they used to do with the NWA title. Then you'd have to find the team that wants that schedule. Because remember, every NWA champion wanted the
other than
job.
Flair. I already know where you're going. Other than Flair.
Yeah. Other than Flair, everybody wanted the job, and once they got it, everybody asked out of it because they couldn't keep up the schedule physically and mentally, and it was ridiculous. Everyone but Flair. He did it and would still do it in a heartbeat. So now you're going to have to find 2 guys or maybe 3 guys with a 3-man team like the Freebirds, or 2 guys and a manager that want that schedule. And then, obviously, they're not going to, if you've got the best tag team in the NWA would have been working for either Crockett Promotions in the Carolinas or potentially in Atlanta or Florida, you would have had to give them the same deal the NWA champion had, which was a cut of the gate to entice them to do that. Because if you're working every night in the Carolinas, you don't want to give that up to work 3 nights in the Carolinas and then go to Kansas City for 2 days, where you're not going to make nearly as much money as you would doing whatever they were doing in the Carolinas, and then go to some other territory. They would have to have been paid like the NWA champion, a percentage of the house legitimately rather than just the territory pay, or you wouldn't have gotten the best tag team in the world to want to be the world tag team champions and travel. They'd have wanted to stay in the Carolinas and make all the money they could make. Unless it was a higher paying job, and to do that you would have to get the promoters to agree to do that for another traveling set of champions.